Welcome back to Washington, D.C. and the White House. It must feel a little bit like a bunker these days. This city and this country is still reeling from Wednesday's extraordinary events. 5 people are now known to have died in the storming of the Capitol building by a pro-Trump mob, including a police officer. Federal prosecutors are investigating charges of sedition against the President of the United States for inciting them. He's changed his tone dramatically in a highly scripted speech, but he has said that he will not be showing up for the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden. Well, our Washington correspondent Siobhan Kennedy is with us. So little time, Siobhan, so much to say.
Well, Matt, yes, as you said, it was a dramatically different tone we saw from the president last night. As close as we're going to get, let's face it, to a concession speech. But he was dragged kicking and screaming to make that speech, wasn't he? It was heavily lawyered, and he did it really through gritted teeth in robotic style, and then undermined it today by saying he wouldn't attend the inauguration and by praising the very supporters that last night he'd promised to punish. He knows the walls are closing in on him, but will he be removed? Unlikely, Matt, by the 25th Amendment, which would require Mike Pence to support it, and unlikely too, really, by this move to impeach him as soon as next week, because it would require 2/3 of the Senate to support it too, and that is unlikely. But it speaks volumes, doesn't it, that Nancy Pelosi has today spoken to the Joint Chiefs of Staff and asked them to keep him from accessing the nuclear codes. So worried is she about Donald Trump's state of mind.
In calling for this seditious act, the President has committed an unspeakable assault on our nation and our people.
It's disorder. It's chaos. It borders on sedition.
Instigating a mob to move upon the Capitol to attack the citadel of democracy would fall within any definition of impeachable crimes.
With prosecutors eyeing charges for inciting mob violence, escalating calls for his ouster and resignations mounting, an embattled Donald Trump last night launched a desperate, blatant bid to rescue his presidency.
A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power.
He tried to look sincere as he read from a prepared script and denounced the violence that's left 5 dead, including a police officer. But within hours of his video message, the president today was back on characteristically defiant form. To all of those who have asked, I will not be going to the inauguration on January the 20th. And of the 75 million people who voted for him, this message: they will not be disrespected or treated unfairly in any way, shape or form. But it was a hardcore segment of his supporters that stormed the US Capitol on Wednesday after hearing President Trump himself urge them to take action.
Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength.
And who he, in his conflicting message last night, appeared to disown.
To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. And to those who broke the law, you will pay.
The president's confusing bid to distance himself from the deadly assault on the Capitol did the opposite, as the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, frightened he could do even more damage, said in a letter they'd move to impeach him as early as next week if he doesn't immediately resign.
The president's abuse of power, his incitement of a mob against a duly elected representative body of the United States is a manifestly impeachable offense. If there ever was an impeachable offense, what the president did was it.
The Democrats' preferred option is to invoke the 25th Amendment to immediately remove Donald Trump, whom they believe isn't mentally sound and is unfit to discharge his duties as president. But it would need cabinet support, and 2 of them have overnight resigned, and the very unlikely approval of Vice President Mike Pence.
Good afternoon.
But so worried is Nancy Pelosi about Trump's state of mind that she's spoken today to the military's top brass about keeping an unstable president, she says, from accessing the nuclear codes. An unprecedented bid to protect a shattered nation from its own commander-in-chief, as the flag over the Capitol was lowered to half-mast in honour of the police officer who died while trying to fend off an attack by the president's own supporters.
Well, earlier I spoke to John Bolton, who was Donald Trump's national security advisor. I began by asking whether the president should face a criminal investigation.
Well, the acting U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia has implied as much. I can't say that I have reread the sedition laws and incitement to riot laws in the past 48 hours, but having been a lawyer for a long time, it sure looks like it to me. So I think it should be investigated.
He's only got, 10, 12 days left in office, and there are many people calling for either his impeachment or his removal. What do you think should happen with Donald Trump's remaining time in the White House?
Well, there are really three options, one of which the Wall Street Journal this morning called for Trump to resign. So I agree. I think he should resign. Now, there is absolutely zero chance that will happen. So moving right along to the other two, I think for those who advocate either invoking the 25th Amendment, for which this situation was not made, or impeachment, that they have to be able to make the case that proceeding along either of those lines would make the situation for the next 12 days better than it is now. And I don't think they can make that case.
What could the president actually do in the next 12 days that he's got left in the White House that would be detrimental to national or indeed international security?
I do think it's a little hyperthyroid to imagine a scenario like the movie Wag the Dog or some use of military force. I'm not really concerned about that. And I'm not really all that concerned that he's going to do much in any sphere. I think we'd all be better off if he got on Air Force One and flew to Florida and spent the next 12 days golfing. I think that's why I use the phrase gritting our teeth. I don't think we should overestimate the dangers here. So let's take a chill pill here and try and evaluate this very cold-bloodedly, very realistically.
What about in the next 4 years? I mean, could he, under these circumstances, try and run again for office, as he has intimated that he might, or do the charges and accusations of sedition prevent him from doing so?
Trump would like to keep it in the public mind that he would run again in 2024, but I think, in fact, there is ultimately no chance that he will do that because he doesn't want to lose again, and he knows he's lost. He can claim it's stolen once. You can't make that con twice.
But a lot of the accusations being leveled against Donald Trump this week, frankly, they were out there years ago when he first ran for office in 2016. The history of lies, the obfuscation of the truth, the whole fake news business. Why was he allowed to get away with it amongst his own supporters and his own Republican lawmakers for so long?
Well, I know there are some people who are perfect and who knew all of this 5 years ago. There are about, I don't know how many people who turn out not to be perfect who didn't know that.
Weren't the things that have now come to light in a rather dramatic way on the steps of the Capitol building evident to you, obvious to you, at the time when you served him?
No, it's inconceivable to me that a president would actually incite people to break into the Capitol building. I believed that the weight of the office, that the gravity of the responsibility, the consequences of the options he would be dealing with would have affected him deeply, as they did 44 prior American presidents. And it turned out that was wrong because, and this is the good news, I think there is only one Donald Trump, and in 12 days he will not be president anymore.
John Bolton, thank you very much indeed.
Great.
Now, you've got to remember that all this high drama is coinciding with the worst week so far for COVID infections here in the US. Yesterday, more than 4,000 deaths were recorded, a dismal record in a pandemic which has been badly mismanaged by a president who flirts with alternative facts, famously. Ever since he got involved in politics, Donald Trump has encouraged conspiracy theories as long as they damaged his opponents. On Wednesday, these theories converged in an act of violence that shook America to the core. Conspiracy theories are the political equivalent of COVID, dangerously infectious, especially when they're given license by the president himself.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing.
In the mob, notice the letter Q from QAnon. On social media, its followers, and there are millions of them, believe that Trump is saving America from a plot concocted by extreme left-wing Democrats and paedophiles. He was asked about it repeatedly during the campaign.
The QAnon movement appears to be gaining a lot of followers. Can you talk about what you think about that?
Well, I don't know much about the movement other than I understand they like me very much, which I appreciate.
Like viral infections, conspiracy theories have the most unlikely beginnings. One of them started over 5 years ago in this Washington pizzeria. When I lived in Washington, I used to take my kids to this neighborhood pizzeria all the time. And I was just astonished to hear that this place was at the heart of one of the original pro-Trump conspiracy theories peddled on social media. That in the basement of the Comet Pizzeria, senior Democrats, including Hillary Clinton, were organizing a paedophile and child sex trafficking ring. Utter nonsense, of course, but believed first by tens of thousands and then millions of Trump supporters on the internet, and revived again this year on the QAnon website, where it merged with a far more consequential allegation, equally bogus, that the 2020 election had been fraudulent.
This has been brewing for years, and experts have been warning that it would eventually lead to violence. And quite frankly, many of us are surprised that there wasn't more violence on Wednesday. They believe that Joe Biden is a socialist, that he will fundamentally change the nature of our country if he becomes president. They believe, there are others that believe he is a part of a child sex trafficking ring, that he's a pedophile, that the Democrats and anybody aligned with them drink children's blood and worship Satan. Like, none of these have any basis in fact.
Yet they are fervently believed, even by many beyond this crowd. And considering that Trump got 74 million votes, the conspiracy theories and their damage cannot be underestimated.
In terms of the survival of the republic, I am very concerned. I don't think we're on the verge of a civil war, but we're certainly on a pathway that could lead to a civil war if leaders do not do the right thing and start telling the truth, even if the truth hurts, even if the supporters don't want to hear the truth. You have to start giving them the truth so that we can at least come back together as a country under a shared set of facts.
The peaceful transition of power is the bread and butter of any democracy. And as they huddled in Congress, Republican lawmakers who indulged President Trump's baseless accusations have to ask themselves, how much are we to blame?